welcome back to another in our series of Northern Road Link live streaming sessions. My name is Don Parkinson, and I'll be your host for this streaming session, the final in a series of sessions that have been focusing on the feedback we have received on the Environmental Assessment Terms of Reference, or ToR. As you may know, the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, MECP, has extended the comment period for an additional 90 days until December 14th, 2022 for the 22 Indigenous communities that may be affected by and or interested in the NRL project. Today we will be having a discussion on the Aboriginal and treaty rights and interest related comments that we've received. We hope you have found and continue to find these sessions helpful in presenting the input received on the terms of reference. Our intention by discussing these comments and sharing them with you is to be as transparent as possible about the input we have received. When we move into the new year, we will be announcing another set of live streams that will parallel our project activities. We hope you will find them useful. So why don't we get started? Now, maybe before we dive into the actual presentation, I thought I would take a stab at a few questions that we received via Facebook from viewers of our last stream that was on environmental assessment related terms of reference comments. Before we go any further with today's show, I thought I would answer these. So let me run through the questions and give you the best answers we can give you right now, and then we'll move on to the presentation. So the first question we got via Facebook last time, 2 weeks ago, was, will the corridor follow the esker that KWG staked? Is it the lowest impact route? Great question. So at the moment, there are 12 alternative corridor segments. Each of those segments is 2 kilometers wide. And the 2 kilometer width is used to allow us to route around, to go around constraints that might be identified. Constraints are things that we want to avoid, such as sensitive environmentally sensitive areas, sacred areas, cultural areas, etc. Various segment combinations are possible to put together a full corridor for the project. Some of the segments follow portions of the esker staked by KWG Resources, so it is quite possible that some of the route will actually follow the esker. As to whether the esker sections are the lowest impact sections, we can't really say that at this point, as it really needs to be investigated further, and there needs to be further alternatives analysis undertaken. So I hope that answers that question to the degree that we can at this point in the project. Another question we received was, how will the 100-year model of flooding be managed at local culverts, especially during fall rains and spring runoffs? Great question. Very, very good question. And right now, the answer I can give you is that design flows for sizing the culverts will have potential climate change impacts factored in, and will draw from the best available flow data that we have. And also, we will rely on information provided by local community members about changes that they've observed over time in specific areas. That is extremely helpful information. The elders in particular have incredibly long memories of and have great abilities to identify um, occurrences that might be attributable to climate change in different areas, and this is very, very useful in directing our team in road design in particular. Another question we got was, where are the houses being built? And this question is an interesting one. There are no houses being built as part of this project. The project is strictly an all-season road connecting the Martin Falls Community Access Road to the Ring of Fire. mineral development area. There will be permanent supporting infrastructure associated with the road, such as gravel pits, quarries, maintenance facilities, and access roads, but there will be no residential homes associated with this project. So I hope that answers those questions. If you have further questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. We love to receive your questions and to respond to them, and we want to share as much information, um, if about the project as we can. Whatever we know, we want to share with you. So, thanks again for asking those questions, and we'll endeavor to answer them. We may not answer them right on the spot, but we'll endeavor to answer them in the next live stream session. So let's dive into now what we're going to talk about today, and that's comments received on the proposed terms of reference, which is the work plan for the environmental assessment. And the comments we're going to talk about today are the ones that are themed around Aboriginal and treaty rights. And this is a big topic. So we got a number of comments on this, and I'm just going to run through them and clarify them, provide an explanation where I can, and hopefully that will help everyone's understanding of what we've heard from about the project terms of reference, the proposed terms of reference. So, in terms of consultation and engagement, one of the comments was, and I quote, regarding Aboriginal and treaty rights and interests, the ToR, or terms of reference, and subsequent consultation and engagement plan should be written to adhere to the most stringent requirements associated with Ontario or our IAC, the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada's environmental or impact assessment process. So, those are the two regulatory bodies, the two bodies, the provincial MECP and the federal IAC, Impact Assessment Agency of Canada. They set the rules basically for the environmental assessments or impact assessments as they're called in the federal process. So as proponents, Webequie First Nation and Martin Falls First Nation have to satisfy both of these regulatory requirements, the federal and provincial. So in doing so, we will be adhering to the most stringent requirements as identified in this comment that we received. So I hope that helps clarify that. Now, we also received comments relating to Aboriginal and treaty rights extending beyond IK and land and resource use. This was a really interesting comment, actually. So let me read this comment for you. The comment was, Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous land and resource use are components of rights and interests of First Nations, but don't represent all of the rights which are present in the project area. These rights extend beyond harvesting rights and omit cultural rights and other rights of importance. This is a great point. And so that was a very helpful, very helpful a comment that we received on that topic. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about Aboriginal and treaty rights and interests, valued components. And we got some really interesting comments on in this area. And just to remind everyone what valued components are, the formal definition of valued components, or one of the formal definitions, is components of the environment that are considered to have economic, social, biological, conservation, aesthetic, or cultural value to Indigenous groups, the public, federal and provincial authorities, and interested parties, and have the potential for change as a result of the project. So, worded simply, what's important? The things that are important to people, whether it's environmental aspects such as wildlife or fish and fish habitat, economic impacts, social impacts. These are things that can change as a result of the project. They're valued components. So that's what we mean when we talk about valued components. So the comments we got around the Aboriginal and treaty rights valued components was suggestion of some additional valued components related to, for example, indigenous use of land and resources valued components. So one of the suggestions was the availability and fragmentation of land for rights-based activities and other interests. So these are being suggested as indicators. So you have valued components, which I just talked about, things that are important to community members, for example, fish and fish habitat, wildlife. Then you have these things called indicators. The indicators are ways of measuring impacts. So what the comment relates to here is that they're saying that availability and fragmentation of land for rights-based activities and other interests. So with a road being built, what impact that would that have on how available those lands are, and how would that affect land-based activities and other activities that indigenous communities might be undertaking in the area. So that was a really interesting suggestion. And another indicator that was suggested related to indigenous use of land and resources was perception of availability of land for rights-based activities. What so that would be a measure. So what is the perception, with the construction of the road? How would that affect the perception of availability of lands for traditional purposes? So these are really good suggestions, actually. And then there's another proposed valued component, which was more associated with cultural continuity and well-being. And the suggestion was that the indicator be cultural landscapes and safe access to travel routes. So the measuring stick for the VC, the valued component of cultural continuity and well-being, would be those cultural landscapes and the safe access to travel routes to practice rights. So that's another really interesting suggestion, I thought. And then the final one that was suggested was related to governance, and so the valued component would be governance. So the indicator would be changes to Indigenous authority and jurisdiction through imposition of colonial regulatory processes, as it was called. So how do we translate that into something that's easier to understand? Well, um, for example, if the EA for the road is approved, could this impact existing Indigenous governance or authority or jurisdiction over the area with that road in place? So that's something that a community proposed as an indicator for a valued component of Indigenous governance. So these are all extremely creative suggestions. Actually, a lot of really good ideas were shared with us. And then another area where we received some comments was related to the proposed terms of reference in UNDRIP. So UNDRIP is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, also known as UNDRIP. And just a very high level description for you. The declaration affirms that Indigenous peoples are equal to all other peoples, at the same time recognizing the right of all peoples to be different, to consider themselves different, and to be respected as such. Uh, the UNDRIP also recognizes the urgent need to respect and promote the inherent rights of Indigenous peoples, which derive from their political, economic, and social structures, and from their cultures, spiritual traditions, histories, and philosophies, especially their rights to their lands, territories, and resources. So, this is when they're talking about UNDRIP, we're talking about uh, what I sort of very briefly covered at a very high level. Um, so the comment that was that was provided that I'm going to share with you was the proposed terms of reference do not uphold the spirit and intent of the United Nations Declaration of for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, UNDRIP, including Article 37, which requires the respect of the Indigenous nations present in Treaty 9 territory. So, what is Article 37 from UNDRIP? Article 37, Indigenous peoples have the right to the recognition, observance, and enforcement of treaties, agreements, and other constructive arrangements concluded with states or their successors, and to have states honor and respect such treaties, agreements, and other constructive arrangements. So that was the comment related to UNDRIP, stating again that the proposed ToR doesn't uphold the spirit of UNDRIP, um, specifically Article 37. So again, very interesting comments that are very helpful in shaping the proposed ToR. And then finally, we get into some more discussion about valued components. This time, I guess the word is we could use as weaving. So integrating Indigenous knowledge into the environmental assessment or the impact assessment. Now, historically, environmental assessments or impact assessments, um, they took Indigenous knowledge and put it in its own sort of compartment. It was separated from everything else. It wasn't integrated or baked into all the component studies associated with an environmental assessment. And this has changed. This has definitely changed, and I'll get into that in a minute. But one of the comments that we received is all components of the physical and biological and social environments must be assessed in an integrated manner to ensure Indigenous knowledge and information related to Indigenous rights is interwoven into the assessment process. So this has changed. So now, as I was telling you, or before, as I was telling you, Indigenous knowledge was sort of kept in its own separate section in an environmental assessment. That's not the case anymore. The expectation of the regulators, both federal and provincial, is that Indigenous knowledge be fully integrated into all aspects, into all studies associated with the environmental assessment. Another comment we received was quote described in each section through a pathway analysis tying the components back to contextualize Indigenous rights valued components input for each VC. Again, integrating Indigenous knowledge into all the valued components. Another comment we received was input by First Nations, other than proponents, into the baseline conditions, mitigation measures, residual effects, follow-up strategies for each VC related to their rights and interests or areas of concern upon development of the EA and IA. So once the EA and IA is prepared, and during the process of preparing it, involving communities other than the proponents in that preparation. So that was another comment that we received. So as you can see here, a lot of comments related to Aboriginal treaty rights and interests. Very constructive comments, very helpful comments that that allow the team to sort of think a different way and modify and tweak the approach to make the environmental assessment and the impact assessment more as comprehensive as possible. So very, very helpful, constructive input that we received with regard to Aboriginal and treaty rights and interests. So that goes through all of the comments I wanted to go through. Um, I wanted to thank everyone for taking the time to listen to our streaming sessions. We hope you join us again in the new year when we continue our discussion of important topics associated with the Northern Road Link project. I just want to remind everyone that you know, I guess both in Indigenous communities and the general public, that they can engage with the project team in a number of different ways. Whatever best suits them, you can build your own method as well. But we have a number of consultation and engagement options available to everyone, starting with focus group sessions, which is a more in-depth sort of session which would be an open discussion with a small group of, let's say, 4 to 6 participants. They could be council members, they could be just regular community members, they could be technical staff, and we would assemble this group to talk about concerns about the project or anything you'd like to talk about with regard to the project. Another approach would be community sessions. Um, in community sessions would be community meetings, for example, where we actually show up in person and speak to community members about the project, provide a presentation, answer questions, sit down with community members and to gather further information, whether it's Indigenous knowledge or just their general opinions about the project or questions they may have. Another approach would be drop-in sessions where we could set up a location at a busy spot in the community and have a table set up where people could come by and pick up information about the project from us and ask us any questions. And so drop-in sessions are another approach. Virtual focus groups. This would be an open discussion with 4 to 6 participants. Um, again, this would be done virtually, so it would be done through a Zoom call or any kind of um, uh, virtual method platform. Virtual community presentations is another approach that we have used before on other projects where we set up a meeting and we can have a group of community members in one location and they can interact with us, the project team, without us actually there. Um, Teleconferences, we can go back and do the old style teleconferences as well too. That's possible. Another approach would be to come to your community and get on the radio station, the local radio station, and take your calls, talk a bit about the project, take your calls, answer questions, and hopefully have a translator as well with us to make sure that we can get the message across to everyone appropriately. We also can do online surveys as well too, where you could visit our website and complete a survey and submit information as well. So there's lots of different ways that you can consult and engage with us on the project. And again, we'll follow any local protocols necessary just to make sure that we are communicating with you in the way you would like us to communicate with you. So hopefully this has been helpful today. Hopefully these sessions to talk about the themes of comments received on the proposed terms of reference were helpful. Again, just to remind everyone, your comments are the comment period closes on December 14th, 2022. That will be 2 days from when this is broadcast. And so we look forward to any further comments you may have about the project. We will try to answer anything to the best of our ability. Please stay in touch with our project. You can go to our website and contact us there. And I'd like to thank everyone again for joining us. We will see you again in the new year. I'm not sure exactly when yet. We have to figure that out. It'll probably be sometime in late January, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of interesting topics. So keep your eyes open on our website. Keep your eyes open on social media for any announcements, and we will see you again in the new year. Miigwech.